Sometimes life throws things at you that just feel impossible. So today, we're going to look back, way back, to some of the most powerful and enduring stories ever told. Why? Because hidden inside them is what you could call a blueprint for resilience, a kind of guide for getting through the tough stuff. So, let's dive right in.
Seriously, think about it for a second. When life feels like it's just too much, where do you find that strength to just keep going? It's a question we all have to answer sooner or later. And what's so amazing is that these ancient narratives, they offer this incredible framework. Think of it like a timeless map for finding your footing when you feel completely lost.
Okay, so our first section is all about this idea of a blueprint for hardship itself. What we're going to see is that these aren't just separate, isolated stories. When you actually weave them together, something pretty amazing happens. They form this really powerful, consistent guide for building not just resilience, but real character.
And here's the thing. The core message is so simple, but so profound. Everyone goes through stuff. Trials and tests aren't reserved for a select few. They're a part of the human experience for all of us. But what makes these stories so compelling is that they don't just say, hey, life is hard. No, they actually reveal a path through the hardship. And that's a total game changer.
All right, so that leads us right into our next section, the anatomy of a test. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty here. We'll break down what these stories teach us about the very nature of life's biggest challenges, and more importantly, what virtues we need to dig deep and find within ourselves to face them head-on. And for our first case study, we're looking at Prophet Ayub. His name itself has become the very definition of patience. His story is, frankly, a masterclass in how to endure when you're faced with a loss that is just unimaginable. And when we say loss, we're not talking about just one bad thing happening. The sheer scale of it is staggering. He lost all his wealth, his livelihood, gone. His health completely failed him. And then his friends, his community, they turned their backs on him. Literally everything was stripped away from him.
But this is what's so incredible. Look at his prayer. He doesn't yell at the heavens. He doesn't demand a cure. He doesn't even ask, why me? He just states his situation with this incredible humility. Hardship has touched me. And then, in the very next breath, he affirms his faith in God's mercy. You see, his patience wasn't just gritting his teeth and suffering in silence. It was an active, powerful turn towards faith, right in the heart of total despair.
Okay, so now let's pivot to a totally different kind of test. This one isn't about enduring loss. This is about trust. With Prophet Ismail and his father, Ibrahim, the challenge was all about demonstrating absolute obedience in the face of a command that, from the outside, seems impossible to follow.
And his response is everything. Just try to put yourself in his shoes for a second. Imagine being told that you are the one to be sacrificed. Ismail's reply has zero fear, no rebellion, just complete submission and trust in a divine plan that he can't possibly understand. That, right there, is faith in action.
All right, that brings us to our third big idea, where the nature of the test shifts again. Now we're talking about power, but not in the way we usually think about it, as something that corrupts. Here, power itself becomes the test, a test of gratitude, of humility, and of responsibility.
And a perfect example of this is Prophet Solomon, or Solomon. The abilities he was given were just extraordinary, controlling the wind, commanding unseen beings. But it's so important to get this distinction right. These were divine miracles. Their purpose was guidance and truth. They weren't magic, which comes from a place of deception. That's a huge myth about him that the sources are really clear on correcting.
And despite having all this mind-boggling power, what truly defines his character is his humility. There's this famous story where he's marching with his entire massive army, and he stops everything, because he overhears a tiny ant warning its colony to get out of the way. And he doesn't get annoyed, he smiles. He shows compassion for the absolute smallest, weakest creature. Now that is what true greatness looks like. And speaking of journeys, maybe no story shows the path from hardship to power better than the story of Prophet Yusuf, or Joseph. The highs and lows are just epic. He's betrayed by his own brothers, thrown in a well, sold as a slave, then thrown in prison for a crime he didn't commit. It sounds like one disaster after another, but each of those terrible moments was actually a step in a much bigger plan that would eventually place him in a position of incredible authority. Okay, so this next part, this is really the emotional heart of this whole blueprint. We're talking about those rock-bottom moments, those times of pure desperation, and the incredible, transformative power of turning back to your faith when it feels like all hope is completely gone. And you can't get a more vivid picture of this than the story of Prophet Yunus, or Jonah. He gets frustrated, he abandons his mission, and as a result, he ends up in a situation of just absolute isolation. It's a physical and a spiritual rock bottom.
And just think about the layers of darkness he's in. It's not just one thing. You have the darkness of the night, then the crushing deep darkness of the ocean. And all of that is happening inside the ultimate darkness, the belly of a whale. I mean, can you get any more hopeless than that? It's literally the definition of it. And yet, from that place, arguably the darkest, most isolated spot on earth, he says this prayer. And again, notice what it is. It's not, "Get me out of here." It's a raw, honest admission. I was among the wrongdoers. He takes responsibility. And in that moment of repentance, that moment of turning back, he transforms his prison into his place of salvation. It's an unbelievable turning point.
So we see the power of repenting, of asking for forgiveness. But what about the other side of that coin? What about the power to give forgiveness? For that, we have to go back to Prophet Yusuf. Because now, the tables have turned completely. He holds the lives of the very brothers who left him for dead right in the palm of his hand. And these words, this is the climax of his entire epic story. He looks at them, after everything they put him through, the well, the slavery, the years in prison, and he says, "No blame will there be upon you today." He chooses mercy. He chooses to break the cycle of pain right then and there. That is what it looks like when power is used for grace, not for getting even.
So where does all this lead? That brings us to our final section, the ultimate reward. After looking at all these incredible journeys of patience, obedience, humility, and repentance, what's the final, big picture lesson we can take away from all of it?
Well, this table really pulls our whole blueprint together beautifully. You can see it all laid out. With Ayub, the key was patience. With Yusuf, it was forgiveness. Ismail's story is all about obedience. Suleiman's is about gratitude. And Yunus teaches us about repentance. Each one gives us a crucial virtue, like a tool we can put in our own toolkit for when life gets tough.
And really, if there's one thing to remember from all of this, it's this. The hardship, the pain, the loss, the injustice, it's all temporary. It passes. But the lessons you learn from it, the character that gets forged in that fire, the faith you hold on to, that stuff is eternal. So I'll leave you with a question to carry with you. The next time you face a test in your own life, and you will, we all do, which of these virtues, which part of this blueprint will you remember first? Will it be patience, forgiveness, trust, humility, or repentance? Something to think about.